an amazing HVA system.
Okay, we're ready to start, if we can stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Anne Marie.
All right, today's is work session, April 5th of 2018, and we are gonna start off today's work session, discussing Downtown Revitalization Committee and some form-based zoning. We've asked everybody to come talk about it because we have been mentioning form-based zoning, so I thought it would be a good idea, to kind of sit down and just, review it, go over it a little bit and see if it's something that the board is interested in pursuing possibly for downtown.
So, the zoning that we have now, which is your basic function as town board to control land use in the town, is technically called Euclidean zoning. It was based on a Supreme Court case called Ambler Realty Company, Euclid versus Ambler Realty Company. It was in the late 1920s, I think, where the Supreme Court actually allowed the government to control uses of land. So, and it was really based upon impacts. And so if you look at our zoning, the way it's developed over the years in most towns on Long Island and probably throughout the country, zoning is based on impact. So we don't put next to a residence and like a smelt factory. That's one of the things. And if you look at our code, there's a lot of interesting prohibited uses that would be, sauerkraut factories and very odd things like that. And the way it's developed, it's become very cumbersome, and you see now we have two big books instead of one small book, and the more uses and things that develop in terms of land, the harder it gets to manage it this way. So one of the things that's been, and it's not very recent, it's, in the last, I guess, 20, 30 years, or maybe even longer than that now, is a form-based zoning, and that's a different approach, basically using impacts as the ground level discussion, but instead of zoning by use and saying you can do this here or you can't do this here, and you must have this setback here and you must have this setback there, which generates all kinds of weird results, as you well have seen in your careers. Form-based zoning is functions in a little bit of a different way, and it looks at more like what do you want it to look like, and how do you get what you want in a particular area.
And form-based zoning should not be confused with spot zoning.
No,
Spot zoning is a different thing altogether. And, form-based zoning would be a code similar to what you have now, but just a different premise. So rather than saying you can't have this use here and you can't have this use here and your front yard setback is X and Y, it talks about, physical form, what you want it to look like. It talks about structure, it talks about character of buildings, it talks about what you want on the street, how you want it to look, what you want it to be able to accommodate in terms of pedestrian traffic, vehicular traffic, or similar things like that. So I think all of us probably have a little bit of a basic discussion on, but there's a nice diagram, and I actually printed out a few of these for you guys too.
What other towns have adopted the form-based zoning?
Town of Riverhead has.
Yeah, actually.
I mean, but besides Riverhead.
What they're doing over in Wyandanch is, form-based zoning. There's a town,
We can share.
not Terrytown, but one of the towns upstate is doing it, over by, the Republic Airport, that new development they're doing over there. They're doing form-based.
Farmingdale?
Farmingdale, yeah, they're
So-
using form-based zoning over there also.
So that's all Village of Babel, or Town of Babylon. Farmingdale and.
No, I think the,
And Wyandanch.
and is it the anything in Hub is form-based zoning.
What further west is?
Is it Hempstead that's doing it? It's Wyandanch. Wyandanch is doing form-based.
Wyandanch Rising, that
Yeah, I
project?
think that's
Yeah,
all form-based zoning
That,
there.
I'm pretty sure that is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you might be right.
Most of us don't really know which towns or where off west.
Because I would like to see what the samples are that they've done in their zoning for
Yeah.
the Ronkonkoma Hub and for the Wyandanch Rising, and also by Republic Airport. That's Farmingdale, so I think that is the.
They're all online, and they both
Okay, so you'll get them
approached
for
it a
us?
little bit different.
Okay, of course.
Wyandanch and there's different ways that you can approach some of the form-based zoning, the way you go out further. And I think each one of them are doing it a little bit different also.
Okay, I'd just like to have something to compare it
And
to.
I did bring a sample, this is an interesting sample, and this deals with the downtown area, a little bit bigger than ours, this is Beaufort, South Carolina, which I mistakenly pronounced Beaufort when I was there. But, it talks, it gives you, this is their actual code, and so there's a little bit of a hybrid here, and I think that's one of the things that we talked about, you know, some things you would be wanting to be prohibited uses, so in this case, you know, in the downtown, agriculture is a prohibited use, aviation services probably doesn't make a lot of sense, and then they have an ongoing list, but then they talk about, they actually break it down street by street, so they have a map, and I'll let you take a look at this, and I flagged some pages here, how they do it, and they have, you know, that, they talk about lot coverage, building heights, building widths, but most importantly, their description of the street, so in this case, you know, they've identified a particular street in their downtown, and they've given it a dream, right? So they talk about, in this particular case, this is called Boundary Street. The street serves as a central roadway in the regional transportation network connecting with downtown Beaufort while serving the important function of moving cars in and out. Boundary Street should also be a pedestrian-friendly street due to physical and natural constraints. The character of the corridor varies. Building along on the corridor should be mixed use and have doors and windows facing the street. And then it goes down, and it gives you an actual, like, sort of a picture of what they want it to look like. And, you know, some general mass and size, so they have 80% lot coverage, they have 60-foot maximum building height, 5-story maximum, but then you go to different districts or different streets within this district, and they have different building volumes, but they talk about, they want, building fronts are required to provide shelter to the sidewalk by means of at least one of the following: arcade, colonnade, marquee, awning, and second floor balconies, things like that.
Is that the zoning code, or is that a plan?
It's the zoning code,
Wow,
it's
and they
actual,
put pictures and maps in the
Yep,
zoning code,
it's a
interesting.
completely different way.
It's very visual,
Representation of what you want.
of what you
the
want to
community
be built.
Well, it's not a bad idea.
Right.
Because that's
One
the
of the
master plan
problems-
tweaked.
But the
But
problem
if you
with,
look then at the
It's
back,
not, but-
they give you
And
building
Councilwoman
components, they
Giglio-
actually give you cornices and window design and window
Landmarks, I
sizes
love that.
and, yeah, so it's gonna be whatever the legislature here wants it to look like, and it's
Right.
gonna be dependent upon your feelings of how you want it to develop, and that could go right into the downtown committee discussion, obviously.
and
Yeah,
that's part of
because
the
we
problem.
did do the form-based zoning at EPCAL, but
Yes, yeah.
we weren't as descriptive as this is.
Right.
And when you're talking about making adjustments in building heights as far as stories in certain areas, like we anticipated, which Jim's plan was, from the
That's right.
railroad tracks going 5 stories or taller, and then coming down to Main Street and going smaller. Now, is that something that would trigger secra?
All this
The whole
triggers-
thing will
The
for a
whole-
while.
Okay.
It's a big undertaking, and it's certainly something that's going to require you to look at things and study them differently, and that's kind of where we're, you know,
But the
getting to the
beautiful
ground.
part is, once new and different uses come into play, you don't have to revise then the master plan.
Right.
Every time
Yeah,
today, something new arises, a different use, it's compatible with everything else, but we haven't identified it. We have to go back to the master plan, and we have to pay, you know, for the updates or the secra, or this really allows the town board an avenue
More
to have
flexibility.
Well,
flexibility.
this is more flexibility planning wise, and I would assume it
Yeah.
saves us financially.
But if you
Well, it's gonna
recall,
cost us a lot of money to do the secra unless we do it in-house. What's the plan for that?
well, we're going to see, because it's an urban renewal area, if we can get a grant for it.
Okay.
so maybe some strategic
And
planning.
Councilwoman Giglio, if you'll remember, even at EPCAL, you were a proponent and advocate for certain prohibited uses.
Yep.
And we would do exactly the same for downtown.
Okay.
It's more design-based and what you want it to look like, and I
I
think
think it's great.
when you get to, go ahead.
I think it's great. It's something that we've wanted to do for a long time, but we just haven't had the funding to do the secra and the whole, restudying of certain hamlets, and, you know, it is time for that. There's a lot that needs to be done.
And there is a lot, I think most of the board agrees that there has to be a real hard look at downtown as far as what's allowed and what we may not want to be allowed in the future. And this may be a catalyst for us to go ahead and do all those redesigns and rezonings and stuff and give us a reason to do that, which is good.
And I also think it's good for people that wanna come in and develop, because it's very, you're laying out the map of what you're expecting from them. So somebody coming in knows what is expected of them and what we're looking to see as far as build out goes. And it actually makes the process, once this portion is done, makes the process much quicker for somebody to be able to come in and develop.
This document is extremely technical and numerically driven, and when anybody calls it, what can I do with my property? Oh, yeah, go to the code. Well, if you take this code and try to visualize what is gonna be built, it's next to impossible. And that's what the form-based code allows you to do. It allows you to visualize in the code what you want certain areas of the town to look like.
And if you flip to the second page of this landscape printed,
Great, you see that.
publication, it shows you how, what the difference is between, I think you have the number.
It's between conventional zoning versus the
And
zoning
how,
code.
how it generates more design kind of, elements rather than uses, so, because, and I think Amber's point was important, because we have uses now, where we say, oh, we have an internet cafe, well, that's something we've never thought of in 1965 when we developed this, and then we might have had sauerkraut factory, but we're never gonna have a sauerkraut factory.
Don't put that off.
I know, it's actually in the code.
Well,
It's actually
we do a lot of
sauerkraut.
horseradish.
Come on, think about it, breweries.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all of
Yes.
those things that,
You
we-
know,
you know,
that's
so
all in there.
this is a more living kind of a code where it would, you know, really, it wouldn't dictate the use necessarily, but it would manage the impacts, and it would manage what you really want it to look like, which is your end game anyway.
And it very much addresses the public realm of,
Yeah.
of
Yes.
what you want, which is, you know, good for the downtown, even which way the doors are facing, to come in and out of buildings.
What's the next step on this, if we were gonna talk about this? Public hearings and all that?
Well, it's kind of getting, if the board is interested in doing it. If the board is interested in doing it, then it becomes writing up the code and doing, the secret on it.
We have been interested in doing it, and like I said, Jim's been talking about doing it for 5 years, it's just,
Okay.
the money hasn't been there to do the secret study, so I would say the first step would be to apply for the grant, see if we get the grant funding, because there's going to be public outreach involved, obviously, with landmarks and architectural review board and civic associations and, you know, people that actually live downtown.
Downtown
that-
Revitalization Committee?
Well, I think this is all also part of, we have, you know, for 2 years now, we've applied for the downtown, the DRI, the Downtown Revitalization, grant that the state gives out, that's that $10 million, grant that
Keep missing it.
has been given out. Well,
Passed.
it's gone to Nassau County 2 times, and, you know, definitely going to apply for it again.
Well, this might give us a leg up, because it looks like we're doing something.
Well,
That's,
this,
the committee, you know, the creation of the committee and the start of formulating ideas, to be able to put that in the application, that it shows we intend to move forward.
Yeah.
I mean, it
I
gives a
think
little
last time-
meat.
And I think last time we applied for it jointly with Southampton, and I think that Riverhead could have gotten the grant on the merits of just ourselves applying for it, but the board decided as a whole to move forward and go with Southampton, so I think we have a better shot at it with just Riverhead.
well, that is the question also. Are we applying it? I mean, I would prefer to apply for it on our own, I know
Absolutely,
last time, so
absolutely.
is
I was
everybody
against going
okay with that?
Southampton.
Okay.
I'd prefer to do it on our own, and I'm really excited, I'm excited to get started with the downtown committee, and I think this is much more of a progressive approach in every way.
Are there obvious cons to this? What would a naysayer say that this is not what we need?
I don't think there would be any cons that you could identify that would be worse than what we have now.
This
And
unfortunately is
we-
like comfort food, people are used to it,
Right.
especially lawyers. And one thing we hear constantly is, this is what the zoning allows,
Don't blame the lawyers.
and
Exactly.
therefore I'm legally allowed to build this.
Property line to property line to property
Right.
line to property line, and 5 stories, and it could be one big canyon effect, block building, rather than,
And it's,
Having
and
the
it-
cake
that's not
effect.
what we want.
And
That's
then
not what
I
this
think
intends,
how many
but the
times
numbers
we come
add up
across,
to that.
Mhm.
you know, a project where you say, oh, I guess that's allowed, it doesn't make sense. You you know.
But
and-
those will be the only people that will be opposing it, is the people that are being cut down from 5 stories to 3 stories, and the people that are,
But
if that's what happens,
if
yeah.
that's what
Right.
happens, because you
We don't
don't.
know what's gonna happen at this
Right,
point.
you don't know
Right.
what's gonna happen till you start to do it, but, or it also allows it, you know, one of the big questions is, what is downtown? Where is it?
Right.
You know, is it from town hall to the historical society, and then like, sort of like a triangle up to the railroad station? We don't even have a clear definition of what downtown is, because you have DC 1, 2, 3, 4, and it changes a lot of things, so, you know,
You can have some, you
what
can
do you
have
want
some industrial thrown in there too in some
Yeah.
areas.
we have
Yeah.
boundary map for downtown, what we,
We have the urban renewal boundary,
Yes.
that's East Main Street, then we have the bid boundary, that's a different boundary, then we have the parking district
and the
boundary.
historic district
And the
boundary.
historic
Historic
district
district
boundary,
boundary.
yeah, so we have a lot of different,
We have boundaries
Things.
within the downtown area, but we have the
Yeah.
urban renewal area, which is really considered the downtown area.
that's the area that you have probably the most opportunity for redevelopment in a big way, because you don't have that, we have to get the lowest, buy or sell, projects with the lowest bidder. You can use somebody who's a, qualified and eligible sponsor for an urban renewal project, which is generating, what you need or want down there.
I can tell you, just to back up a little bit, I realize that, maybe going after this grant solely for Riverhead is a good thing, but I don't want this town ever to lose the synergy between us and Riverside, because there is no disconnect to the people coming to town.
And-
So, and not that we should partner with them, but we certainly, even this downtown committee should look at that synergy between that traffic circle and
And they're doing a lot there, and I think, I don't think it was a bad decision to partner with them last year.
No, I don't think so
It was
either.
just the decision at the time, and
Right.
I think that it's gotta go to Suffolk County this year. I can't imagine it doesn't go to somewhere in Suffolk County this year. That gives us if that indeed is the case, then we have a much better chance. But what they do there impacts us, and what we do here impacts them, there's no question. There's a, an imaginary line drawn up the middle of the river that's
Yeah.
there, but it doesn't really change much in terms of, that synergy that you're
Right.
discussing. So I think, hopefully, they're doing a lot to have the RAB plan, that is a form-based zoning code there that they have, and, they're working hard to try to get something to happen there, so it benefits us for sure.
Yeah.
want somebody else to pay for it.
I understand what you're saying about the synergy, but I think we have enough to move forward. I wanna,
Yeah, and that's
Oh,
certainly,
yeah.
certainly one way to go, and it's,
and we really advocate for our town.
and that we will do.
We're at 2 separate levels, I mean, we're much further along than
And we have
Riverside and Flanders and the Southampton side is. And nothing against them, but to bring them into the equation, I think bogs us down and holds us back.
Yeah,
I think it's difficult to
Well, yeah,
to re-
number
yeah,
one,
that we under-
sewers,
Yeah, exactly.
absolutely.
Well, I'm not
Yeah,
saying that we
but it
shouldn't,
also
I'm just
becomes
saying that,
difficult
let's not
to-
lose that sight down the road.
yeah, we
that's all.
agree,
Right, no, I agree, Jim.
And I think it becomes difficult to apply for the grant when you are at those 2 different stages, because
Yeah.
it's,
Right.
how are, the money is, if you are awarded it, is to make a particular impact. And starting at those 2 different stages, I think is not, won't work as well.
And we have a lot of background studies, we have our BOA, we have our urban renewal plan, we have the parking study that's underway. You're looking at maybe potentially getting opportunity zones for downtown, which would also
That would be
give it an
fantastic.
infusion of cash potentially, and so you're lining it up perfectly. It's just,
When is that grant application due?
it's not open yet, so it's, I think last year it was in June, and mid to late June.
So we gotta
submitted
get
it.
started if we're gonna have community outreach for,
We have, that's part of the downtown revitalization committee. We'll start with, that's part of the start of it. Been meeting with BID and, other entities from downtown. I think one of the things that we're gonna be doing next week, the week after, is a walkthrough of downtown, just to see who's in charge of what. What the store owners and landlords are in charge of, what the town is responsible for, what areas need to be addressed immediately, what areas can be addressed, over a period of time. We know one of the areas is the garbage in the back of the buildings there over by the river. I mean, that's a tremendous eyesore and not a welcoming view when you come to town, so how do we all work together to fix that?
I would like to be
So-
on that walking tour.
Okay, that's fine.
Certainly, I
Um,
wanna take a look at, empty buildings that
They
are
also
not being
do.
maintained
Yeah, I
well.
agree.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
really offensive.
Very good,
So that'll be the beginning. All right, thank you guys very much.
very nice discussion, have a
This is
nice.
exciting.
It is good.
Do you want this back? To make copies?
Yeah.
I'm gonna wanna,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can just scan it and email it, that'd be great.
just give me the website, you know.
Yeah,
Now
you know,
we
send
know
an
we-
email and then you can print out pages if you want.
Okay,
So
okay.
it'll be conservative,
Thank you,
you know, ecologically.
thank you.
And then this is a design guideline that was done by the Landmarks Preservation Committee, several years ago, which is an interesting read. I know it's for the historic buildings, but it does have a lot of recommendations as far as a look.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys wanna.
I mentioned that to Anne Marie on the side while while you guys were discussing that, this form base isn't unlike the historic district.
It isn't, and you can certainly, play off it, that's what, so, you can choose how you wanna develop and what you want it to look like. And that's the whole part of it, that's pretty exciting.
There's some public spaces on the south side, that's what we need.
It is,
All right.
it is.
So next, on to, FCAL for the qualified and eligible. So I just wanted to discuss with the board, because we have an April 6th, for the end of public comments. I would like to see if the board would like to extend that, just because we have not been able to request all the information that we need. We haven't been able to, dig through financials, at this point, and we need to request some stuff, so, I know I still have some questions, so I don't know if the board would like to just gather our questions from the board that we can send over, within the next week, then give Kat a couple weeks to answer those questions. And at that point, once we get all our questions answered, then we can, set the closing date for the, comments. Because I think once we get everything, we still need to give the public, an opportunity to write in their comments once we've received all of our information. Because I just wrote up a couple questions I have. I know at the last Q&A, we had closed it, but we had asked them about, some experience with development, some of the development projects they have done. I'd like more questions answered about that, sort of their projects' names, types, locations, square foot, project size, some of their financials as far as, some cash flows, 20-year cash flows on them, some of their current projects that they have going on, the financial structures. So I think there's a lot of questions yet, that I would like
know that a lot of the
answered.
questions were answered, because I had asked the same questions when I went into the city, like what large-scale industrial projects have they built? And they referred to Sunset Park, which was a 200,000 square foot, industrial park in Las Vegas that they built 15 years ago, and that was presented at the second qualified and eligible hearing, so they did
Yeah,
address
but I'd
that
like to
in-
know a little bit more about that project, because I don't know if it's 200,000 square feet or 78,000 square feet, and there's a phase 1 and phase 2, so what was the original phasing and timing and opening? I'd like to know how they did that, and they said they had several other industrial projects that they did, so I would just like,
I think it's a
review of
lot
them.
easier to have them come before us as a town board and ask the questions across the table, rather than have a, stunted other additional public hearing. I think that on an informal basis, you can go back and forth and get your questions answered, like, while they're sitting here, rather than, taking weeks and months and trying to go back and forth, asking our questions through the lawyers, and then having them ask the questions, and then there's a follow-up question, and then there's the public. So I think that doing it in a public forum, in an informal setting, such as a work session, once the, even if you wanted to extend it, just having the public hearing with them sitting before us, all their team, answering the questions, rather than going back and forth by email. I just think it complicates things, and I don't think that you get to the root of the question.
Well, I think at that point, then I think we can submit these questions to them, and then if we choose to, after we
Bring
get,
them in.
bring them
Yeah,
in, we
I
can
kinda like that
bring them
idea.
in.
Yeah, because there's always an explanation as to why phase 1 was built this way, and then there was a holdup on phase 2, and sometimes that explanation can be difficult to put in writing to where we can understand what really happened in that scenario, so.
Well, certainly, I think we should be as thorough as possible. I mean, this is a huge
Well,
decision
of
for
course.
us. And I'm more than willing to do everything in a public forum. I think all of this kind of stuff should be done in a public forum.
Okay, good, 'cause,
So,
so then you would not favor then our passing our questions around an executive session as what was proposed last time?
no, it wasn't passing questions around an executive session, it was to
Okay.
compile all the questions
Okay,
And submit them.
and submit
Yeah,
them.
that's what we did. I mean,
And then the
I
attorney
compiled my
said that.
questions and submitted
Anyway.
them. And then we did them at the Q and E, and then I'd like to go back in and look over and make sure that they were all answered. So I'm all for that.
I think it also gives them time to thoroughly answer these questions, because I think some of them are more complicated, and I think we want specifics. So I think if we give them the opportunity to have them in writing and get a chance to answer, I don't think these are quickly answered questions. I know from the Q and E, we had asked these questions and, you know, parts of answers were given, but not full answers, so I'd like the full answers to the questions. So, I mean, would everybody be in favor of submitting them to them in writing, giving
I
them
would
a
submit
chance?
them and then I would
Then
have them come
in.
and
Right,
respond.
absolutely.
Okay, so we'll do that moving forward?
What about you? I'm interested in submitting questions, and I have no problem with having them come to a work session and answer them if our lawyers.
Yeah, I just have to
Recommend
check
that.
with if it has to be in a Q and E, or it can be done at work session, I'm not sure on that.
Okay, and then,
I would guess a Q and A, but.
Yeah, I
you
think
know,
it's universal.
did everybody have a chance to look at the operating agreement?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah, just that's
Did anybody have any problems with it, or,
yes.
okay, you wanna discuss
I
that,
will.
or that's gonna be part of your questions?
It's part of my questions, there's nothing in there for about transferability rights and buy-sell provisions. I think that's a big gap in the operating agreement that I don't see.
Transferability rights, meaning that they would be able to sell the property if they wanted to, or?
Transfer among partners in the LLC. And there's no buy-sell out provisions.
Yeah, the only question, well, first of all, there was no notary acknowledgement attached to it, so that was
Correct.
something that concerned me. And then it also,
Just so you know, we did double check with the attorneys that that's the complete operating agreement, and their attorney Catterson did confirm that that was the full operating agreement that they signed.
I know, but they might have left off the notaries, I mean, we
Apparently.
can't use that really, I mean, if they furnish the notaries and, anyway.
You wanted,
It's the actual agreement, but we need the notary acknowledgement attached to it, and then in the runway use agreement, it also refers to the agreement with Luminati and 400 David Court LLC, and 400 David Court LLC did not sign the operating agreement, so we need to see a separate agreement from 400 David Court LLC authorizing Luminati to sign over the runway if this proposal should go forward.
okay. So that could be all questions that we ask, so that we know that they can address it and come back to us with if they've changed the document or not. All right, so for us, what day do you wanna give us to, hand questions in?
I would say by the end of next week, hand the questions in, and then bring them
Okay,
in the
so by
following week to
the-
answer them.
So by the 13th?
Mm-hmm,
Okay,
next Friday.
yeah. Got that in your calendar?
Right now.
Alrighty, very good, and Diane?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect timing.
You're quick, John.
extending the deadline for public comment?
We will extend the public, yes, because we haven't received all the information, so we can't really, we can't close it.
Do you have a date for the extension yet?
We do not have a date for the extension yet, because we will put our questions out there, and then we will have to reschedule, whether it's at a Q and E hearing or at a work session, for them to come back, answer our questions, and then only after that will we close public comment, not until we have everything answered that we've asked. We'll close public comment after that
Do
period.
you need to, like, adopt a resolution or anything to extend it, just open?
I am told we do not have to do that.
Open till further notice.
Yes, thank you.
Friday the 13th is always a good day.
But it's important that they get their comments into us so that we can make sure that all the questions that were asked have been answered, and you
Well,
know.
it's also once we finish asking all our questions and have all the answers, that we have there's a period for the community to continue to comment.
So are there questions that weren't able to be asked at the last two qualified and eligible hearings that we had, or they're just afterthoughts
What do you mean,
from us?
We did
my
last week.
questions?
Yeah,
No, they were questions that were not answered.
okay, so they were asked at the qualified and eligible, but they were not answered,
Not answered to my satisfaction, how's that?
okay.
You know, when,
Curious to see your questions.
well, like I said, we asked about the industrial commercial, it was the McLaren Sunset Park over there. It's 200,000 square feet, what phase is it in? It was phase one, that was 200,000 square feet, and phase two was supposed to be another 300,000 square feet, but the phase one's taken 15 years. So what was the original projection? Was there
So
a
they
phase one, phase two?
you didn't feel that they answered that question to your
Thoroughly enough,
satisfaction?
thoroughly
Okay.
enough, yes, correct.
That's why I think that across-the-table discussion is much better environment to go back and forth with your questions and answers, rather than just not getting an acceptable answer or
Well,
a
I think
complete answer.
I think some of my questions are complicated, and it may take a little bit of research to be able to answer the questions, so I think that giving, somebody the opportunity to come back with the full answers, if they choose not to come back with the full answers, that's up to them, but at least they have the opportunity to do that, because I think when we asked those questions at the Q&A, which I thought were pretty common questions, there wasn't a full answer to them, because, in an industrial property build-out, you would think you're coming in to build an industrial property, you would have that information of previous experience. I mean, that's what the qualified and eligible is, your previous experience in doing certain projects.
Oh, and I thought that that's what they presented as their previous
Well,
experience.
and Laura, we've
but-
been, when we correspond, their answers come back to all of us, and we've been putting the stuff on the
Line,
website.
yeah.
So certainly, I think that's more appropriate too than a one-on-one meeting.
Well, it wouldn't be a one-on-one meeting, it would be the five of us and all of them.
Right, and I'm saying that's much more appropriate than a one-on-one meeting.
Well, maybe in your opinion, not in mine.
Wow, that's nice. All right, Friday the 13th.
Diane, would you like to come up and present? This is for the legislative management software.
Good morning,
Good
everybody.
Morning.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. What I'm looking for is like a template management system.
Tonight, next.
No. It's really to create, for public meeting process, to manage our agendas, minutes, resolutions for the town board meetings, not just town board, also for planning and zoning board could also take part of this. I'll just read a little bit from what I have on some of my notes. It's agenda building and distribution with automatic routing of agenda items. Configuring document templates. This is important because all the different departments that create resolutions could use these templates, so it's all consistent, the
All
formatting
uniform.
is the same, which is really, really helpful.
Sure.
Especially when you're thumbing through one of your large files.
Especially when it's
of what
an
the
Well,
hour
document
before
looks
the
like.
yes.
meeting and you're still trying to put things
Yes,
together, 'cause
exactly.
they're handed in late, it would be.
Right, and they're all formatted the same, so, and then they would all be compiled into, like, with a one-click system to get them all compiled into a very nice agenda, and I've borrowed, a sample from one of our neighboring towns, and it really is a very nice, professional-looking document. So,
Southampton?
that's Southampton, yeah,
And-
they've got a very nice.
You wanted us to
Sure.
look this up?
And is
Sure.
that
Good
software
side.
compatible with the IPS?
Yes, I'm told it is, but I won't go into any of that because technology is not my strong suit, so.
But Terry was involved in the
Yes.
meetings and did ask, questions about whether it was compatible, and it's all cloud-based, so that it's
believe
not
it's-
taking
yeah.
up it won't, take up space.
And what's the cost?
We're trying to keep it under 10,000, and that seems to be where we've been, talking to several companies, and that seems to be a good possibility that it's just gonna stay under 10,000. And that is already, I have money in my budget, so that's very doable. And it's gonna help.
Wow, you're lucky.
Yeah.
You're one of the few that has money in your budget.
Right, well, it's records management money, so
Okay.
in whatever way I can use the records management money. But I think that this will be very helpful because it'll help the public to access things better on our website.
Oh, great.
And it'll give, the retrieval, archiving and retrieval will be better, for everyone here. We should be able to, I don't know all the particulars, just
Search
have some brief information. but saving time and money, and it's eliminating the manual part of it, because right now, we just manually do everything with Word documents, and this will just be so much easier and better, faster for everybody, but also, like I say, retrieval and archiving is a big part of it. On the beginning end, putting everything together will be, you know, everything will be formatted the same, it'll be easier for everybody. And also the attachments, right now we try to attach a lot of things to our resolutions. You know, we have the FIS that we just started, and we have, you know, a lot of times legal and,
Contracts and all
right, the financial end, the legal end, maybe engineering has some, so you might have like 3 separate documents attached. Right now, we have this very cumbersome,
Yeah. I
you
get
know, when you're looking through at the meetings, you know, you're, this
It'd be
one
ni-
cumbersome
It'd be nice if these
document.
contracts could be an attachment on a resolution
That's
instead of.
that's what
yeah.
this is, it's like a separate attachment that you'll be able to just go and click onto the attachment and view it that way. So it'll streamline everything.
That's right.
It'll-
Sounds great, I'm all about computer software and
good.
efficiency.
Yeah,
And
And Bill, while you're ahead,
Yeah.
It also allows you to, you know, if something needs to be reviewed by somebody else, prior to it going, like say if 2 people
Yes.
have to review it, it's say legal and somebody else, it won't let it go to the next person to review until legal has checked off if they're,
Right.
if they're a higher priority on it,
It's like
which
a
is.
check-off system for each department that needs to check off on it, which is really good, because then you'll know where it is in the process. And that's really very helpful, because as it is now, sometimes like John and I are chasing people down, calling departments, emailing and trying to see where things are. This will simplify it so much better.
And then also when you're done, once the resolutions have passed or not passed, it can go right back to,
Right.
whoever it was pertinent
Right,
to.
so, you know, like working from our work session and then switching over into our town board meeting, it should then just streamline very easily from one to the other.
good work,
Yeah,
Diane,
okay.
sounds like the
Well, you
system
know
was a
what,
little,
you gotta move forward.
sounds
Yes,
like it
yes.
was a little antiquated and you're
Yeah,
moving us forward.
Yes, when I
which-
look at some of our neighboring towns and I really see that, what they're working with
Right.
is great, and it's so helpful in so many ways. Time saving is money saving, so.
Yeah, there you go,
Nice
Diane.
work.
And we're gonna get a Spanish interpreter, you just move right up there.
We're moving ahead.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
thank you.
Diane.
Thanks for all your work on that.
Okay.
All right, is there anything else anybody wanted to bring up, otherwise we'll go into executive session? All right, can I have a first and second to go into executive session for, personnel, the potential hiring of individuals in the police department?
before we do that, I know that the board was curious about the questions that I had asked when I went into the city and met with them. Would you like me to go over all those questions and answers now?
You can do that, we want to do 4 hours?
Well, it wasn't 4 hours, it was just more of a discussion with them back and forth, trying to get the answers and then getting the answers but I'm more than happy to go over them all right now.
If you want to, does the board wanna do that?
That's fine with me.
Yeah.
Okay, so, I had some questions, when the chamber meeting took place, and I was the only town board member that attended the chamber in the middle of the snowstorm, and, for
Well, that's
reasons.
because we were in the middle of 2 Q&As.
Okay, but, anyway, I heard the Gramesians say that Illuminati was no longer a voting member of CAT. And when I heard that, I asked them if they had any documentation to that effect. And they immediately got on their phone with the lawyers and started working on that, and with Daniel Preston. And when I did go into the city, they presented me with that document, which the next day I immediately emailed that document and all the town board members and to the 2 town attorneys, and got a call from the supervisor saying, where did you get that document? And I said, I asked it for them on Wednesday night, and when I went into the city to meet with them, they gave it to me. So I emailed it to all the board members, and then I was told that I should not have met with them, and then I guess there were discussions back and forth with the lawyers, and.
Did you think to check with the lawyers before you went?
No, because I've been involved in 5 Q&Es before, and we've always had open discussions during a Q&E process with previous applicants, so I didn't think that there
During-
was
in the
anything
middle of
wrong
the
with it.
Q&E?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Well, I find that arrogant. I
Okay,
I
well-
check with the lawyers.
okay, well, anyway, that's my experience in being on the town board for the past 8 years. And especially when it came to Vintage Group and the qualified and eligible, where actually Jim and I attended a meeting with the AFL-CIO, and we actually wrote a letter in support of the application while we were through the Q&E, because they were in the process of changing the whole proposal. So they were coming back to us with the Q and E and the public hearing in order to change the previous Q and E that they had already been approved. So we were in the middle of those negotiations and those talks with them, and Jim and I actually did go and meet with them at Diggers with the AFL-CIO, and John Dunleavy and I actually wrote a letter where, you know, in support of it. So, anyway, that is my experience in being on the town board for 8 years. And we also had Riverhead Resorts. We had the qualified and eligible for the runway use agreement, where we had scheduled the public hearing, and even after the public hearing, while the comments were open, we were in continuous negotiations with Illuminati as to the runway use agreement. So it's just been a thing of the past and something that I have been involved in, where we have been speaking with applicants during a qualified and eligible process. So there was no,
Except that Jody,
you're interrupting me.
complain.
You're
All right,
interrupting.
I can
So
wait.
there was no malintention in going into the city and meeting with them, because I have met with other applicants before. The project description did not change, the dollar amount of the project did not change, and the outcome of the project and the project description did not change by my meeting with them and
The
asking them
fact that
questions.
any of that, you're even addressing that without an attorney there, was their attorney there?
No,
Who was at the meeting?
it was myself, Chris Kempner, and the applicants from Illuminati.
Okay.
Um,
Chris, why was Chris Kempner there?
Because she's a friend of mine and she's an attorney, and she has been very familiar with the project and
So
the
she
property.
Has she been working with the Gramasians and 555?
No, she has not been, but she did
Has she
take,
set up meetings? Did she
I know
set
that
up the
there was a
meeting?
call made
But
to the,
did she set up the meeting for you, or did you set up the meeting?
no, I set up the meeting.
You called
Because they asked me to meet with them, and I called them up and said, yes, I will meet with you, so.
Who set up the meeting for the Chamber of Commerce? Was that Chris?
No, that was the Gramesians, and that was Bob Kern from the Chamber of Commerce.
And so Bob Kern called the Gramasians?
Yes, I believe so.
And can you tell us how you got in there?
Well, you
I,
can't, you can't.
I took the train in and used my own personal money, and actually left hungry and thirsty, because there was no food or water after the 4-hour meeting, so.
Well, Jody, you have to understand that there's been a lot of talk, especially, you know, you actually were upset too with Sean about transparency. So, you know, if we're talking about transparency,
Yes.
this is not transparency.
Okay, well, you wanna talk about transparency? I'll talk about the closed executive session where we were all sitting around talking about whether or not,
Excuse me for one second, if you're talking about something in executive session, it doesn't get discussed here.
well,
It's, Jody, executive
Okay.
session is executive session.
the attorneys told us that we couldn't do what you wanted to do. So yes, it was, I am about transparency.
For a quick timeout here, I thought we were discussing your
We
notes,
are.
let's get on to the point.
We are, thank you, thank you. Okay, so I did discuss, you know, I had several questions for Daniel Preston about, you know, what college did he attend at age 12, and what years and degrees, and, you know, did you go to public elementary, when did you graduate? Daniel was not at the meeting, so he was not able to answer any of these questions. I had questions about his form upstate. I had questions about the runway use agreement and whether it's a safe and usable condition. Has he spent
what was
any
the answer?
money?
What was the answer in the meeting?
Well, they have not analyzed because CAT doesn't have control of the property yet. So I asked them if they had hired the consultant, Lima, the planning consultant, because there was a proposal from him for $35,000 to do the planning during the due diligence period, and they said they had not retained anybody because they don't have control of the property as of yet. So they were not gonna be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in hiring applicants to tell them what the conditions on the site were until they actually had control of the property and they were in the due diligence process if they were found qualified and eligible.
You think you'd wanna know what your project costs are?
Okay, so then I asked them, what other large-scale industrial projects have you built? And they discussed the Sunset Park, the 200,000 square feet. They also discussed a garbage truck company that they had manufacturing, and that they had just sold the company last year, along with several of the garbage trucks that were energy-efficient garbage trucks. So I said I would like more information on that.
Did you receive that?
Not as of yet. I asked them if they would give a personal guarantee on the improvements. They said, what do you mean by personal guarantee? I said, well, we wanna know that when you put the improvements in, or when you start the improvements, that they're gonna get done. So it's a tremendous expense. I think it's been estimated at $40 million, and I would like to
The
see.
infrastructure you're talking about?
Yeah, the infrastructure. I would like to see a personal guarantee. I asked them if they will be building Union, and they indicated yes, they would. and they also indicated that on the record. A lot of the stuff that I asked, they answered on the record, it was re-asked and put into their notes, and they answered on the record. I asked them what happened in Maryland Springs, Silver Springs in 1996, where, you know, the executive of the city was, you know, dismayed, and they said that it was not a project that they were interested in proceeding, and so that they were walking away.
They pulled out of the project, or the town chose not to work with them first?
They indicated they pulled out of the project.
That's not what I heard, but.
Okay, then they said they were aware that there was no retail permitted at EPCAL. They did not, I asked them if there was any pending litigation with them being sued or them suing.
And the answer
And I
was?
talked about the Alberta Treasury in Edmonton.
What was the answer to the suit or being sued?
They said, I did not get the answer to that question, so they're gonna answer that one. How many jobs in America, retail and industrial? They did answer that at the Q&E. This was more for Daniel. What industrial have you built with 555? Oh, that was for PCL, for their general contractor. What industrial developments have they built with 555? And PCL helped them with the Mall of America and then also with the Edmonton Mall. The nuclear engineering, energy engineering and the biotech company and private equity. They did provide letters of intent from NYU, the Nuclear Engineering Training Center, and they did provide.
I don't think that was a letter of intent, I think that was a letter of support from NYU. Oh, that's from Maglev, was NYU?
Yeah, so where they talked about the 1 mile track from EPCAL to Ronkonkoma, and so all the letters of intent that they submitted at the public hearing were all questions that I had asked about the people that had attended the previous qualified and eligible hearing, and I said, it's great that you came up and that they came up and said that this is what they wanna do, but I'd like to see it in a document, and I'd like to put it on our website for the public to see, because it's much easier to look at those letters from these different companies and verify those companies than it is to just have a bunch of people coming up in a stunted presentation to tell us what they're going to do. So they did provide all those letters at the second qualified and eligible hearing. I asked them.
Just two letters of intent.
There was QTA that they provided.
QTA was not a letter of intent.
Okay, well, let me see which letter I
They
have.
provide
Launcher.
air wing from the helicopter charter company.
Right, they have
And they
Cymax,
provide
they
one
have
for
Launcher,
Cymax, and that was it, and Launcher, that was it.
they have Aberis, should the CPC center be moved to Calverton, then strategic alignment and collaboration.
The CPC center has no intention of moving to Calverton, as they said in the Q&A.
Okay, well, this letter says something differently.
What does it say?
It says,
Should the CPC
Aberis
move?
Training is acknowledged to be the premier training organization in the world in composites manufacturing and repair teaching these disciplines to engineers, technicians, and airframe and power plant A&P mechanics. Aberis has been active conversation with the Composites Prototyping Center about establishing an East Coast Training Center at the existing CPC Center in Plainview to augment the West Coast Aberis Training Center located in Reno, Nevada. Should the CPC Center be moved to Calverton, then strategic alignment and collaboration with CAT and CPC would bring tangible value to all three organizations, as well as to the aviation industry and the community of Riverhead, New York. It is estimated that Aberis could occupy about 10,000 square feet of space initially, with later expansion to 20,000 square feet adjacent to the CAT Innovation Center and incubator space. We at Aberis Training look forward to working with the town of Riverhead and the staff of CAT and the CPC to establish a world-class regional training center at Calverton.
And CPC said at the hearing they didn't have an intention of moving.
Okay, well, this is a letter that's dated March 15th, 2018. Then we have
The hearing
the
was after that.
Composite Prototyping Center that says, strong support. This is the one in Plainview for Department of Education's Institute for Advanced Composites Manufacturing. CPC is looking to work with 555 and local authorities on the development of exciting world-class manufacturing development center in Calverton.
From Plainview.
Then we have Cymax. Well, they said that they had a research facility in Plainview, but they didn't have any manufacturing space. So that's why they were looking to come here.
They have space available there. It's an incubator, they have space available. Cymax is different.
I know, but some of these things cannot be built in an incubator setting, especially when you get larger orders and you need to be in a larger facility that has room for expansion.
When we asked about CPC, they said they were not moving.
Okay, I didn't quite get that from them, but And then you have Cymax, this letter's dated, well, this one's dated December 27, 2017, supports composite prototyping center.
For about 10,000 square feet to 40?
Yep. And then here's the one from NYU, dated March 14th, 2018.
That's Maglev?
That's the maglev.
And they have no funding currently. There's been no dollars spent on that in the US.
Which is a good thing, because the technology exists, and they are looking at high-speed rail, especially getting people from Los Angeles up to San Francisco, because the state of California just voted on that, where it was the toss-up between the water project, which I have a lot of friends that are farmers in California, or high-speed rail, and they're looking at high-speed rail. So I think it's a thing that other countries are doing, Japan and Russia and China, and something that the United States is going to be looking to do, and I would be very excited if it started at Calverton.
So would Chris Kevin. I know
Well,
that's her
so
baby that she's been trying to
So would Jessup Hell.
get
And-
some financing for a long time.
And Brookhaven National Lab, and
Well,
working
one
in
of our-
conjunction.
It's because of Dan, because one of our residents is very instrumental in.
Yeah, no, I know, I know,
That's
I know
right.
the history behind it, it just has not been funded at all.
No, I know
you know.
you try to.
Okay, I asked them for any changes in the operating agreement, which they have provided to us.
Give us the money.
I asked them if they had spoken to any power generator industries, they said that they had spoken to fuel cell and battery storage companies. I asked them, about the manufacturing, and they discussed shipbuilding and US fleets, and the garbage trucks, the high engineered switch gears, and they manufactured the high engineered switch gears. NATO center, data storage, cell phones and internet is what they were looking to do there. Helicopter design, they own a solar company. They have an engineering division with 100 engineers and office buildings. They talked about the music and entertainment, which I wasn't interested, because I said that, you know, that's not permitted in the zoning, so,
What was the question?
I asked them about the amusement and entertainment industry, whether or not they had any intentions of building that on the EPCAL property,
Why not?
because it's not permitted in the zoning, so if they had any intentions of doing that there, it wouldn't be permitted.
I thought recreation was.
Recreation is permitted there.
Yeah,
It's part of the town code, the 301,
I would
314,
certainly hope
you
they
can
would
do
put
it.
a small venue there.
Well, they said they had no intentions of doing that.
It's too bad.
They spoke about the composite company in 2014. Can't even read my own writing. Stunt training, ignition, $50 million in equipment. They talked about the Cymax, the advanced composite launcher, the small satellite to space. Heliogex, which is aluminum industries, which they have, I believe, a partnership in, if I wasn't mistaken. Q-Tech, we talked about, the Boeing Airbus, Thermalift is looking for, I think they have 7 employees for 300 helicopters in the US market, and it's $400,000 per helicopter. The business jet, Boeing Airbus, which was, I believe, a part of Cymax that they were planning on bringing. Then we talked about launcher, how they would be bringing in $10 million in 5 to 6 years of capital improvements, and 100 people employed within 5 to 6 years, that they were in their first year. So I said they were gonna build Union.
Said that.
Went to those. I asked them if they had any cost estimates for the infrastructure at EPCAL. They indicated that the only estimates that they had were the ones that were given to them from the town, which is estimated about 40 million for the sewer and the water. I asked them why 555 Ventures was formed in the state of Delaware, and why the LLC is formed in the state of Delaware, because they said that they did have the operating agreement, it was formed in the state of Delaware. I asked why, and they said that that was for tax reasons. I asked them in their intended development plan whether or not they were going to be selling off parcels or if they were going to be building out and leasing, and they said their intention was to build out and lease, which I was impressed, cause I said if you build, they will come, in my opinion. And I asked them when they will start the infrastructure right away, if they would start that right away, and they said yes, they would look to get to the closest point of where the infrastructure connection was and then start building out from there. I asked them for the sources and use of funding, which they did provide. I asked them if they were going to be bonding the infrastructure.
The sources of funding, when they provided that after you met with them,
No, they provided that before.
the two bank statements?
Yep. And then also the, letters that we got that said that they had, 40 million or 30 million and, all of their, I actually have the letters buried somewhere in here that I could find if I needed to. Oh, that might have been one right there.
But no additional information from what we've previously received?
No. And then I asked them about the intended development plan and zoning, whether or not they were going to be keeping the same map as Daniel Preston had been working on, and they indicated no, that they would be working with Lima and they would be coming up with a new map. I asked them for the partnership agreement again.
Did you ask them about the recreation area?
I asked them what the community benefit would be, and they said, what does the community need? And I said, well, you're adjacent to a town park. I said, so we have, and they were aware of the work session that we had had the week before where we discussed the recreational needs of the park, so they said that they would make certain improvements to the park.
Did you discuss what those improvements would be?
No, they did. They realized that we needed the ball field lights and that we needed turf fields, that we were looking to put turf
I
fields.
don't think we discussed about a grant, and they had said something about a grant.
Well, I don't know anything about, I know that in the past, we had applied for grants when it came
I
to
don't know, when they
park
were
and
up at the
recreation
Q&E, they
facilities.
said, the lights would be $1 million, and we had a grant for $500,000, so I'm
Well, maybe
curious how they
Chris
got
had
that.
discussed that with them, but
With you in the meeting, with them?
no. And there are granting opportunities available, because the last time we looked for the ball field lights, Jim, right, it was $500,000 in grant funding that was available.
I don't know, it just, they said in the meeting that they would provide 2 turf fields for $2 million and help do 1 million with lights. We had $500,000 in one grant, and for a unanimous vote, they would be
Yeah, that
willing
was
to do that.
ridiculous. I thought that was a ridiculous statement, especially to say that, for a unanimous vote, we'll do this. But that was not something that I had discussed. They had asked what community benefits were available. And they also talked about downtown, because they said that they would wanna do things downtown, because they would hope that a lot of their employees that were living there would be in downtown, and that they were looking at busing service and things of that nature to bring people from downtown to the FCAL property.
The wording was just very curious.
Okay, well, of course. Then, the well-paid engineers. They were interested in just doing aviation research manufacturing. And a reactable GPS system.
Well, if they know about that, they must know some of the prices for that, if that's something they're looking into doing, and that's part of what the cost of the runway, so they must know some of the cost of the runway.
They said that once they were looking at a panoramic, I asked them about the panoramic analysis of the property, and I asked them what does that mean, and they said that they would go into a comprehensive view of a panoramic analysis to look at what they saw from above as to what could be done on the property and where the best thing would be to situate, which I thought was interesting. It's an interesting planning, technique that is, something new. When I spoke with them about Steve Rogers mentioned that he was working in a STEM school with the Utah governor, and I asked them if they would put a STEM school here, because Senator Laval was looking to get 10 acres attached to the incubator to put a STEM school here, and they said they were very interested in that, because they wanted, the people to be trained in order to move into the high technology, aerospace industry and manufacturing, and be able to know how to operate these machines, because I guess it's very technical, so they would be interested in doing a STEM school there.
agreed to a STEM school?
They said that they were very interested in the STEM school, and I know Stony Brook represented that they were interested in a STEM school, and I did speak to Senator Valls, who said that he was also very interested in a STEM school. And when Daniel was involved, they, and Tim, and Jim, you might remember that I had asked that 10 acres be carved out of Daniel's
Mhm.
property that was being sold, so that we could give it to the state, so that they could put a STEM school next to the incubator. And Daniel was not willing to work with us on that, where, I know that, cause I've heard from people on the state level, from both Stony Brook and from, state officials, that they have been having meetings regarding this, regarding a STEM school on the property, so, found that very interesting.
Did you ask for them to do the 10 acres? Were they agreeable to it?
They were agreeable to a STEM school. They were agreeable to a training school on site for the purposes of training our youth here into getting into the aerospace industry and to working on machines. I asked them if they would cut back on the due diligence process, and they said absolutely not. What's in the contract is in the contract, and we need to do our due diligence, and we need all the time that we are afforded in order to make sure that we can come in and do what it is that we wanna do. I asked them about PCL construction, and was union a requirement on the jobs that they were in, or was it voluntary? And they said that some of it was voluntary and some of it was, required, but all of it was built union.
I haven't, I mean, most of this stuff, I think we're all aware of,
Yeah, I mean, well, it was brought out at
There's
that.
no smoking gun there, I don't think.
No, but I'm saying it was all brought out at the qualified and eligible hearing, but these are questions that I wanted to dig a little bit deeper in to try and get further answers, and I thought that they had further answered them in a better manner at the second qualified and eligible hearing than they did at the first, and they were prepared to provide the letters of intent and
Do you
answers.
think that's because you went and asked them questions prior to this?
I think that my questions probably made them say, oh, well, maybe we weren't clear on that, and let's go back and be 100% clear on that.
Even though at the end of the first qualified and eligible, we had said that we would not give them our questions and that we wanted to ask our questions in public at the public forum.
Well, these are things that they presented in their first hearing, Laura. So these are side note questions that I had after their first presentation.
And that's exactly what we said after the first qualified and eligible, that we were not gonna give them our questions. We all sat there, we all have questions, Jody. And then at the next public hearing, in a public forum, we would be asking those questions. And that we weren't going to provide them the questions prior to that. It was gonna be done at the qualified and eligible
Well,
hearing.
you may have agreed to that, and I don't remember agreeing to that, but
I think we all sat on the dais and we said that.
I asked Brett, if Hexel had any contracts currently with, Department of Defense, and whether or not they could provide any contracts. I asked them if any grant applications had been applied for using Calverton property as leverage for the grant, and they indicated that no, there had not been any as of yet. I asked them about arts, disciplinary, and design. Ben Thritt from MIT that came and said he wants to come here if they had anything in writing from him, and they didn't, and they did not provide anything at the second qualified and eligible. I asked them about Leonard Poveromo, who testified at the first qualified and eligible that he gave out $170 million in contracts, and you know, that there were new contracts coming in the next 2 to 3 years when it came to STEM schools and STEM work. And he indicated that he was working with 15 high schools. I asked if there was any grant that were open right now, seeing as they had already given out the $170 million, and if they were applying for any additional grant money, and they indicated that they are applying for additional grant money, but depending on whether or not this project goes through, it would be determined whether or not the money would come here. they talked about the composite heat pump system, housing system, and, that Simax was working on, and the helicopter composite, that they wanted to come here, but that was all part of the presentation. And I asked them to clarify that at the second qualified and eligible, which they did. I asked them if they are in contact and discussions with Stony Brook. They indicated they were. They also indicated that at the qualified and eligible. About a Long Island high technology incubator.
And no lunch, and no
No
water.
lunch and no water.
All right, that's important to point out.
I had a banana on my way up the stairs.
Well, hang on to that Rosario material you got there, okay?
I asked them if Robert Hasday was the counsel to CAT. They indicated no, he was not. He was counsel to Illuminati, and that's why we got the letter from Hasday clarifying that he was not the attorney for CAT. I asked them if they were phasing any of the projects, and they said that that would be something that they would look into when they put together their plan as to how they were going to build out the project. I asked them about any environmental remediation and whether or not they had an environmental engineer on staff or somebody that they would be interested in hiring to address the environmental concerns that exist on the property, and they did bring that gentleman to the second qualified and eligible hearing.
Is that the first one too?
Yes. I remember seeing the first one. I asked them about the land that they would be developing, and they clarified that at the second hearing, that they would be developing the 600 acres, and that the rest would be preserved, and that they would be doing a swap out. If the map were changing from what Daniel had proposed now, which is completely different from what we had worked on as a board over the last couple of years. And there was just discussion back and forth about a lot of these things.
All right then,
Yeah.
thanks for the clarification.
Little less than 4 hours.
Well,
Yeah, well,
actually, I'd like to say a few things. First of all, I'd like to be able to get through what I have to say. I'm a respectful listener at these meetings, so I ask for that same respect. I certainly have no qualms about speaking my mind. A Q&E is not a stunted presentation. A Q&E is the proper legal forum for vetting an applicant, which is why we were in that process. We've been elected to represent the town and not our own special interests. And they put our trust in us. They put their trust in us that we would do that. I have to say that a closed meeting is not transparency. And it's not, that's not on the record. I am, you know, glad you brought these things up, but we weren't at that meeting, so we can't really know what went on. And frankly, I am shocked and appalled at the arrogance of a council member going in and having a private meeting. And I wanted to put that on the record.
Okay, I really didn't wanna get into this, cause I don't think this is the appropriate forum, but since it's been brought up, Personally, myself, I would not have gone and had a private meeting. I don't think it's proper. Having said that, and having spent the past couple, 2.5 years or more, working with Councilwoman Giglio, I don't think there was a shred of malice in her mind of going in to do this. I think what she has said with doing her due diligence is what she honestly believes. She works very hard through a lot of problems that we have in Town Hall, a lot of projects that come forward. She puts her 100% into it. I understand the concern that it looks bad, and I agree with that. But I don't think she went in, this is my personal opinion, I don't think she went in with the intent of trying to do anything that was illegal, or go in and try to solve this, or complete this transaction, or get in anybody's pocket. I think that's, couldn't be any further from the truth. But again, I do agree, it wasn't the wisest thing to have been done, but I don't think there was any malice intended in what happened. If anything out of this, I think it's been a big learning experience for the entire board. I have never been through a Q&E, so this was new for me, and fortunately or unfortunately, it's on the largest project that will ever come before the town of Riverhead, before this board, for sure. And it has been a learning experience, and it continues to be a learning experience. The one thing that I think a lot of this has done, it has opened up the communication of the people from the town of Riverhead. Riverhead Local had quoted me as asking people to contact me, which I asked them to put in the article, because it's important for this to happen. And this has also stirred up a lot of people to get interested in this project who maybe wouldn't have taken the time to send an email, make a phone call, stop me in the grocery store. I love it. I love going into the store and seeing people from the community, and they're like, my wife's like, geez, I sent you with a list this long, and 3 hours later you're back. Well, I saw people I knew, you know. That's where a lot of this has to take place, and good or bad, right or wrong, and I don't think there was any, from what I understand, there were no laws broken here. It was maybe just a poor choice.
And in hindsight, I agree.
And I think it has helped to some degree, like I said, stirring up the interest in the project. And I do appreciate that the people, the residents, have taken time to voice their opinion on the project. It's very important. So often we hear from basically the same people all the time. And I'm glad we do. I'm not knocking that, because they do take the time to come out. But we all know there's a silent majority in the town that doesn't take an active role in government or in politics.
Well,
But they all have opinions.
there's a silent majority out there.
Yes, that's what I said, silent majority. But they do have opinions and they do care. They may be working 2 jobs, they have kids, certain things that they're not able to come to a meeting. So it's good to hear from those people also. So,
I just have
That's my 25 cent
two
rant.
schools of thought. One, when I heard it, I thought it was probably poor taste. I didn't think it was illegal, but I thought it was poor taste, because you really wanted that to sound the open, I get it. The second school of thought is, Tim, I don't go shopping anymore because of that, and I.
I enjoy
I
that.
talk to the public on a daily basis through
Yeah.
all my other interactions with the town for a whole host of different reasons. But it sometimes it can get disconcerting when you go, and you're right, you're in the public eye, you're a public official, we're all public officials. Some new, some been here for a decade or more. You're gonna get scrutinized, praised, criticized, heckled. Everybody can do your job better than you. So, it goes with the territory. But as long as you can hold your head up and see that you're doing the right job.
Yep.
But you're right, hindsight's always 20/20. But I appreciate you sharing your notes that you wrote down. I probably wouldn't discard any of those, just in case.
No.
But, let's just move forward from there, that's all.
Well, I appreciate both of your opinions, I value your opinions.
Good.
And I do like hearing from the public, and I like them to hear from me. I don't know a law was broken, but for me, I feel that there was some trust broken, and this is a time when people are, you know, concerned about government and transparency. And, honestly, I felt like it was a black eye to the whole board. So I hope that with something as important as this, that we move forward and, you know, try not, I think it was not good. This is a huge decision for our town. So we can't be, you know, we need to proceed cautiously. We can't be making mistakes like this.
Let's not forget how we got here.
That's right.
The years
That's what I'm
and
saying.
years and years of working to get this.
I don't think it was a mistake, my going and getting the answers to my questions, but I think that the perception that I was doing something wrong
Perception's
is
reality.
definitely,
Perception's
something that I hadn't expected. Which is why I was so open after I had gotten back from the meeting in sharing the information and the letter that they had given me that day. And immediately getting a call from the supervisor and getting, you know, hearing what you all had to say and saying that I wouldn't have any more discussions with them until it was closed. But, you know, when the public speaks to me about it in public, I'm also cautious to say, you know what, I shouldn't be talking to you about this without being at the public hearing. We're in the middle of it. If you have something to say, you should come up to the microphone and say it so that we have your question on record, rather than discussing it outside of the public forum.
Well, I certainly hope in the future you'll reconsider private meetings on matters of such importance.
I make a motion, we go into executive session. Well, I think the motion was made already and seconded, but then we got sidetracked.
Can we
Yes.
just,
If you're gonna, you just need to come up.
Yes, sir. Somewhere down the road.
How are you?
Good.
just for the record, your
Again, my
name
name
and-
is Stuart Greenstock and I work for 555.
Okay.
Stuart, can you talk a little louder? Just
Sure.
'cause it's hard to hear.
Okay, Stuart Greenstock, I work for 555. And I appreciate all of your efforts here in trying to help disseminate some of the information that's been sent back and forth. I understand how important this project is, obviously, and the magnitude of the project, and that doesn't get taken for granted from our end. But what I would say and like to say is that, and I think it's important to just qualify this, is that I think if you all remember when we first started this process, you know, we met in a format that was completely legal. And we didn't violate any open meeting laws or quorums with regard to that first initial interaction that we had. And if you remember, I mean, you know, everyone had gone above and beyond to actually show up to the meeting. It was an absolute
Had to
blizzard.
walk through a snowstorm to get here.
And my car personally actually was
We
stuck.
even got your car moved.
was stuck on the way here, down the block. That's how poorly I drive in the snow. But with regard to what the purpose of that initial interaction was, it was basically to start dialogue in a healthy way with the town, and we wanted that to continue. And the way that the public perception of our first interaction was met was in such a degrading way, and it made everyone go on the defensive, that it almost shut the door on the possibility of us actually coming in and actually interacting in a healthy way with the town. And, you know, we did try to reach out afterwards a few times, and we did try to have some more healthy interaction, and I think that there were a few things that happened along the way. Clearly, there's a very, very strong, and I'm not saying it's not founded, but, you know, this project has a target on its back because of who initially started this project, and we don't need to get into the details, everybody understands that, but the point is that we are looking to be a partner, and we are interested in actually being as transparent as we possibly can be, and that lack of you know, the one-on-one interaction with the town board makes it very difficult for us to really explain to you who we are and give you the information that you really need, because we don't really necessarily feel like we have a partnership here, and that's really what we're trying to achieve. And we'd like the town to feel the same way, and we're not looking to take advantage of anyone in this process.
I think
So-
part of that trust has to be earned, and I think that is providing comprehensive answers to some of our questions, which I think has not actually, the answers that we have received have been not comprehensive. So I think that that would go a long way to helping build that relationship and trust. So, you know, I think going forward, we'll submit these questions to you guys, and hopefully we will come back with some comprehensive answers.
Okay.
And I think you're right. I think, you know, without saying too much, but I think you're right. You came in the shadow of somebody very controversial, who didn't always have up to play to. I mean, so it was, and now that, you know, you're coming out in front, that's probably a good thing. But I can see, you were behind the 8 ball when you came in.
Sorry, Jim.
Sure.
But because of those dark shadows that were on this deal from the beginning, you have to understand too why it's so important for us to have everything out in the public and be transparent. And this is a monumental decision for Riverhead.
Absolutely, and in fact, before our first public hearing, I mean, I did try to reach out, I did ask if I could meet, you know, and we did have a conversation, and I did go through some of what was gonna happen at the first presentation, and I wanted to, I mean, I did try to reach out, but it wasn't met with or received favorably.
I don't remember that. I mean,
I don't
of
think
course
it was-
we have
I
to
don't think-
reach out, but.
No, I
She doesn't work.
No, we
actually
spoke.
spoke to
We spoke.
the supervisor. And the conversation was specifically about the possibility of actually coming in prior to the presentation so that I can actually give that presentation to the town board prior
To the Q&A.
To the Q&A, and give you an understanding of what we were actually trying to do here, and
But I think we did have email correspondence back and forth through the attorney of what we expected.
right, but
At
I'm
the,
saying, right.
at the qualified and eligible, we had already set the qualified and eligible date. It wasn't prior to the setting of the qualified and eligible date.
That's true, but our first meeting wasn't either, so our first meeting, I mean, the date
Right.
already had been set when we met the first time as well. But I think that there were things that transpired post our conversation even, that I think, you know, gave us the sense that, you know, we really weren't working with a town that was embracing us. It was a town that actually wanted to reject us, and, you know,
I don't think that's true. I don't think that that's
but-
true at all, and I don't think that there was any indication from the town to make you feel that way. You know, it didn't come from the town board, if that's the feeling that you had, Gail.
Well, I'm just saying in terms of the ability to actually be received, or you know, when you reach out, you know, and I think that going forward, you know, I think that we should try to be more, and, you know, proactively try to, all of us, to collectively try to connect in a more meaningful way so that you understand who we are, and that it's not so foreign, and it is something that is more transparent to you, and that, you know, we still, the invitation stands, and, you know, we'd love for you to come to see some of our projects, and we'd like you to get to know us better, all of you to get to know us better.
And we are. We're trying to do
Right.
that through these questions. We're
Okay.
trying to get comprehensive answers to our questions. Because our first charge here is what's good for Riverhead.
Understood.
And that's what we're seeking to do also.
And,
So-
and I appreciate what you're saying. But once again, I reiterate, this is a monumental decision, and part of that is, I was open-minded. I was not closed-minded to this, and I've been listening, and I've been doing my due diligence, and I've been paying attention, and let me make that known.
Okay.
And I think that we all feel that way.
Okay.
I think what my personal perception is from the first Q&E, from the first time we met during the snowstorm, to the last Q&E, that when you first came in, you were very new to this. You had only joined onto this program basically a couple weeks before. So at the first Q&E, your answers were extremely vague, extremely shallow. I thought you were much better at the second Q&E, and I'm really hoping that you can take these questions and get us some solid answers by the time we meet again, because I'm sure, as you know, each day is, for a project like this and getting involved, each day you're learning more and more about it, about what you're wanting to do, about what you can do. And we, as a board and the residents of the town, need to hear a little more, or a lot more,
Sure.
in depth than what we've heard at the first Q&E. and the second one was better, but there's a lot more to come, and we wanna hear that.
Well, I definitely need to see more of a development plan from you guys, and
Well,
this project affects our town not only now, but for years and years and years and years and generations to
Yeah,
come.
That's obviously understood, but I think that part of that is also having the ability to actually, for example, when you have a whole slew of LOIs, you can't sign a lease on a property you don't own,
Correct.
right?
Understood.
And you can't necessarily do site planning on a property that you don't have the ability to actually, you know,
But
come
you
onto.
guys own banks, right? So somebody's gonna come to a bank for you and ask for a loan, even if they don't have the whole project mapped out. They know what their costs are gonna be, they know what their intended development plan is. You know, nobody's gonna lend you money just coming in and saying, you know, I'm gonna do something good.
That's
So,
true,
you know,
But having said that though, any bank that I would ever go to would be post due diligence. And I would go to them with a full comprehensive plan, and I would say, here is the actual pro forma, and this is exactly what we're planning on developing in phase one, based on our due diligence, based on what we understand we can actually build, because of all of the testing that we've done on the site, because of all of the information that we've received back from our team that has given us and made us more educated about exactly what we're gonna be required to do. So, having said that, it's virtually impossible for us to go to a bank today without knowing what we can or
But you
cannot do.
still know what your development plan is gonna be.
We know what,
You know what you're gonna invest.
until we actually have a full comprehensive study, we don't know exactly,
I don't think
What-
anybody's asking exact dollar figures.
but to say that you want a specific plan, when it could be that, it could be that we're planning for something that that we can't actually ever put a shovel into the ground to build. And that doesn't make good business sense either. So, what it makes sense for us to be able to do, and clearly a lot of this doesn't end up happening until we are found eligible. So it's, you know, what comes first, you know, and it's a very difficult
But still,
process.
We'll
I get it.
provide the questions and then you can answer
Sure.
them
I
as
get it.
comprehensively
One
as
thing
you can.
did surprise me, that we asked about the runway, and the response was that you guys hadn't really looked at it yet.
It's not that we haven't looked at the runway, but again, this is something that if we're actually approved, right, then for us to be able to come on site and actually start doing studies, right, I'm not gonna be on site doing soil testing today, because I don't own the property. So there's damage that's done, you know, this isn't our property, and this is a very interesting process. It's not the typical process, it's something that is a very complicated process, because typically you would have an RFP or an RFQ.
Well, that's why the Q&A is so important,
That's
because you
right.
don't have that.
That's right.
And so you can understand where we're coming from, why
Right.
this is so important, that we haven't done that, you know, and we never even got a market value on it.
But
And
part
that's
of-
why the intended development plan is so important, to be able to meet those benchmarks.
But that's what you get with an RFP. With an RFP, I hand the person that's actually bidding a comprehensive plan, and I say, this is what you can do here. Now show me what you're gonna develop.
And that's why we have the
That's
qualified
not what we
knowledge
were
one.
given, right? We're being given a piece of property that we have no idea what we're being given. Here's 1,600 plus acres, right? You can't necessarily develop, you know, we can't exactly tell you 100% because the subdivision hasn't been approved. We can't exactly tell you where you can actually do your site plan, right? And understanding all the environmental, you know, restraints, you actually have a very complicated, due diligence that's required.
But we also have a
here.
very, we have our environmental, we have done a lot of planning on it, we've done secret on it, we have our EIS on that. There's a lot of information out there that you can look at.
We understand, and we
So,
understand that,
I mean,
but based
and
on
it's
that,
done already,
but that
and it's
doesn't
on the
necessarily-
website, it doesn't, you can look at that, and you can come up with some educated, ideas of what you're gonna do, and to be able to provide that.
and that is what we've been doing, but at the same time, that plan that's there, it doesn't necessarily mean, that's still not set in stone. That's something that is,
Right, it has to be fluid, because you don't know.
But we
I get
haven't
it.
asked you to set it in
I
stone,
get it.
we're just asking
but
for.
at
A
the
nice
same
drawing
time,
together.
at the same time, if you want a picture, I
Well,
don't,
sounds like to me.
the point is that we're not here to give you lip service and to tell you something and to present something that we're not gonna build. It doesn't make sense for anyone, right? You wanna make sure that you're dealing with someone that's actually gonna give you something that actually has teeth, that is ultimately gonna be the project that is gonna be developed on site here. And yes, the phasing and the amount of money that we're gonna put into it and what we're gonna be doing here, the entire process is something that we wanna dig in and we wanna be running, right? We understand all of the issues, we understand how late we came to the table, we understand that there's definitely a black shadow here. We get that completely. We just wanna be able to.
And I actually take offense to the black shadow, I really do, because I think that we've been very open in this process. We've been very,
I said that.
we've been very accommodating, we've looked through everything, you know, we've listened to everything, so I take offense to that.
I'm not sure I understand that.
She's saying, I think Laura's saying that we were open-minded, that even though there were problems, we still listened, we were still listening.
Okay.
Well, you're a good lawyer. I think, I'm the one that used that analogy, and I said that
Okay.
because there was a lot of controversy with the prior owner, and so of course there was a lot of
No, I-
scrutiny, and we went into it with our eyes squinting pretty good, so,
Well, because
don't you think, maybe,
Riverhead's never exactly had a great reputation for
right, so I
welcoming
mean,
people
I
in.
use that,
So
I use that analogy, so
we,
I didn't defend it,
we
but-
use the analogy of pitchforks and torches, but, unfortunately, good or bad, that is sometimes
There were
how
no
it comes
pitchforks.
across. And, you know, but being in your seat, you've gotta expect some of that,
Well,
I'm sure.
just to bring up,
Yeah,
because you keep, one
Sure.
second, you keep bringing up that initial meeting, which was a mistake, that meeting should have been done. I felt we learned our lesson from that first meeting, which, even though it was an introduction, it was very brief, it would have been great to have that in a work session. So that's why
We've never been
it's
invited.
particularly upsetting when another meeting transpires after that.
We've never been offered a work session, so at the same time, you're saying, well, I think we've been open to you, and I think we've been giving you the opportunity. I don't feel like that's actually true, because we've never been offered a work session. We've never been offered the opportunity to actually come and actually have a conversation
good
like we're
point.
doing right
That's a good
this
point.
moment.
And that's something
that's a
that was
transparent
said at the
opportunity.
chamber meeting, is that you felt that you were at odds with the town from the very beginning. And when you invited me to come and have a meeting with you, and I said, okay, well, I have questions that need to be answered, that I think we need more in depth, and I would like to get to know you, and I would like to do and make the best decisions for the residents of the town, not for Jody Gigley personally,
Right.
but for the residents of the town. And I know that you were not afforded that opportunity, where we have had in the past, when there have been qualified and eligibles, where applicants have come in and had a discussion with the town about their project proposal and their hurdles that they were facing, and I didn't feel that you were afforded that opportunity either.
And I see no reason why that can't take place at a Q&A. I'm sorry. I think that,
At a
this,
Q&A?
yes, this conversation can happen at a Q&A that the public is invited to. I mean, there is this, that is what the Q&A is for.
Yeah, I would just like to, James Lima, working with the 555 team. I hear a lot of frustration on both sides, and it's understandable because the way that this has come about, the negotiation of this and the consideration of the Q&E was a little unusual. But I know from having been a public official doing complicated large-scale development, and really protecting the public interest, and working with the biggest real estate developers in the country, that there are alignments of interest to be found here, and I believe that everyone here actually really wants the same thing. Everyone's just getting a little bit, tense about, the things that could go wrong. And I think it's eminently solvable. We have an incredible team of people who can prepare everything you need to see to make an informed decision as public officials to protect the town's interests. So I really believe that we, with the right amount of time and clarity about what exactly you need, we can prepare a thoughtful, conceptual plan of a development program with the fundamental answer to the question, which I think is at the heart of this, is that, is this financially viable this time? We've had an unacceptable number of false starts. It's no one's fault. But it's understandable that there's a lot of baggage to this project that has nothing to do with this incredibly well-qualified applicant. So I think it's unusual, again, in my experience, and I've done dozens of developer designations for complicated urban projects. It's very unusual to do that in a public setting. I've actually never done it. I think a public process about land use decisions and business deals and the transparency about what informed your decisions is a wonderful process, and I think this has been incredible. But to actually negotiate business terms and to go back and forth
Well,
about
the business
vetting
term,
financials.
all of those all of those were negotiated prior, they were done in December. That was done. So that process did take place, you know, before I was here, but we have 3 board members that were here during that period of time. That was done.
So what,
And
yeah,
two that
like-
voted no for the contract, and 2 that voted no to even go to the qualified and eligible hearing with that contract. But we were overruled, so it went to the qualified and eligible hearing, and then it becomes my job to vet it and make sure that I get the best thing out of that contract that I voted no for the residents of the town.
I mean, are you
Well said.
suggesting you wanna open the contract?
No, I'm really what I'm saying is, and I think you were clear that you're not looking for an ironclad, financial pro forma to be presented at this point, because really what government should do is to leave enough latitude for them to create even more value by having the time, once they have site control, to bring in the best world-class partners to implement this plan, to create the most public benefit that is of value to everybody in terms of job creation and sustained economic growth. And those answers can't be provided now. So what I think we need to do, and it's the right thing to ask for, is like, how do we provide you with
Enough
the
information that
financial
we're-
framework of
Research
what
essentially.
underpins this project to say, yeah, we can cover the cost of upgrading the runway to make it usable. We can cover basic upgrades to infrastructure and still, you know, we'll charge rents that make sense to us. They and our team have worked on projects like this, and have both the capacity and the sophistication to pursue whatever source of financing, debt and equity, grants that are publicly available.
Understand all that, like to see it in black and white.
Yeah.
That's,
So, yeah, we would love the opportunity to actually figure out what's the right time frame to get that to you and to make sure that we're specifically answering the things you need to see.
At the same time, I still don't believe that you're necessarily gonna have that by the time that the 13th rolls around, because
No.
well, then,
That is
but then we discuss that. We, you know, I mean, we're not unrealistic. We're looking for answers. So it, you know, we will give you the questions. If you feel that you need a little bit more time to get the comprehensive answers back to us, we'll wait.
Okay. I mean, but I actually feel a little bit differently that these answers are dependent on certain levels of due diligence that are gonna be required, that we would not be doing unless we were actually approved.
You don't know my questions yet, so,
Okay.
you know, let's
That's fine.
start the process. Let's, you know, well, the board
I thought
has questions and,
I thought we did have your questions. I mean, we don't know the questions. There are additional?
There's gonna be some additional questions coming your way.
yes.
Some may be relatively the same, but looking for a more in-depth answer.
Okay.
And I think this, I'm glad you came out today for this, because
Yeah, well, yeah.
this, to me, is almost more productive than a Q&E hearing, where it's a sterile environment of a question and answer, and the pitchforks and torches are there. So to me, this should have been
So we'd
part
rather
of
sit
the
like this for the
process.
next Q&A? We
Well,
can do that.
honestly,
We
this,
can do that. I mean,
this
there's no
is-
reason you can't do it that
This is really
way.
a better way, I think, to do this and to get our questions answered, and to be one-on-one instead of somebody going up to a podium and a question maybe only gets partially answered, and then it gets swayed to another topic, and this, I think, is very direct and upfront, right in your face, and I like that.
But I do think the Q&E was good in that the public,
For the public,
and I thought
absolutely.
the public was good. I didn't think they
Absolutely.
came out with pitchforks and torches, and I thought that a lot of the people had pressing questions and it gave them an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to air those. So I thought it was good to involve them at the Q&E.
And we
No, I
can-
agree. I
we
agree
can
with that,
set-
but-
We can set the Q and E up any way we want, so if we'd rather sit like this for the Q and E, we can do that, if it makes everybody more comfortable. So it doesn't, you know, that's not a problem.
Well, we closed the public portion, so, except for written, right?
We can, I think that we would like to be,
Well, I've got
have
all the
our
written, and all the
answers,
written I got is,
our questions
just echoes
answered.
what was said already, that's all.
I mean, I think we'd like to have our questions answered, you know, we can keep it open for written comment, we can do another Q and E, you know, we can do whatever it is that we feel necessary to have our questions answered, or to feel satisfied that we've asked our questions and we've received an answer that we're comfortable with, to be able to make our decision. I think that's the bottom line. This is a big decision. You know, it's 20 years that there have been a lot of false starts. There have been starts where everybody thought it was gonna work out fine, and in the end it didn't. So I think it's better to be, ask your questions and feel that there's been an answer to the question, before having to make a snap decision on anything.
So the idea now, just so I have it in my mind, because I've been to quite a few communities over the 10 years too, and this is just more unique than any other one, but so we're gonna pose our questions,
Right,
forward it to them,
Correct.
and then on the 13th, we'll have a dialogue like this where they can answer
If you can answer what you can answer right away, I mean, obviously some questions will be simpler than others. You answer what you can by the 13th, and if you need additional time for some of the other ones, then you just indicate that. You know, and then we can, you know, or if you let us know maybe by the Thursday, because we have our work session on Thursday, the 12th, to let us know what ones you can answer, to provide us with those information, and then whatever you need more time for, and then we'll be able to make a decision then. I don't think we can make too many decisions until we know what,
Oh, I
the
get
ability
it.
to get the
I'm
answers
just
on.
trying, because, you know, I'm going away from 21st of April till the 26th of April, and I certainly will
Okay.
cancel my vacation if something's gonna happen when I'm not here. That's
No,
all, so
no,
I wanna
no.
make sure.
No, but I think that we close the public hearing and the public comment portion of the hearing, and then you're looking now to just extend
I'm
the
not
written
looking-
comment period back and forth?
that would be,
Yes, and give the
Yes.
public the opportunity to
To
see the
answer,
answers to
right,
questions
and then
that
be
have
able to
been
respond.
submitted.
And we
Yes.
meet as a whole and in a public forum. We ask that you not try to meet with one board member, and it's just not appropriate.
When should be the next question?
We said for our questions, I think
By
the
the
6th.
13th,
The
we'll have
13th, we're 13th.
To you by the
Yeah.
13th.
So that'll be our questions. And then originally I said 2 weeks after that, but we'll get our questions out on the 13th, and then you guys look them over and you let us know, where you're at with that.
Okay, thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
I
coming
know
out.
I had asked about Chris Kempner before. Were you gonna say something when I had asked if she had set up for the chamber meeting?
Yeah, that chamber meeting was set up, with my meeting that I had here on the first
Okay,
meeting.
with Bob Kern.
Bob Kern.
Okay, very good.
I don't think we did Chris.
Okay. But are you working with her?
No, but she's been very helpful in making introductions to different universities that we've been talking to.
But
And,
she's not employed by you.
No, absolutely not.
And will there be any employment with her after if you do get the project?
Don't answer that question. Don't answer that question.
It's not, I don't know why that's relevant, but I think that,
Alright.
Yes, it is. It is relevant.
She doesn't work for
Do
us.
you wanna answer it, or you don't wanna answer that question?
She doesn't work for us.
I'm not.
I'm just curious.
Confused what's going on here, but.
Okay.
She does not work for us.
Currently.
There's I mean, Chris is very content in her job at Town of Brookhaven.
I'm not asking whether she's
uh,
content in her job or
I
not,
don't
I'm just
think- have
asking,
you
she
ever-
works for the
Have you made
town.
her a job offer?
No,
Okay.
I'm not, okay.
Okay,
She's made introductions and she's been great, and she's been actually, very helpful in making those introductions.
Well, there's nobody knows more history of that property than her, that's for sure.
okay, thank you.
Thanks for coming
Thank
out, gentlemen.
I think we need to close because Jim's stomach is growling.
All right, so first and second to go in executive session for personnel, potential hiring of an individual in the police department for litigation, current litigation in the matter of the town of Riverhead versus Bating Hollow Farms LLC, Bating Hollow Vineyard LLC, Stephen Levine and Sharon Levine and Richard Rubin, and a current litigation in the matter of Andes and Silver, versus the planning board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.